Welcome, everyone, to another episode of Tech Done Differently. I am your host this week, Ben Schmerler. Ted is in travel limbo at the moment, so I'm going to be hosting this one solo. With me today is our guest, Michael Goetzman. Michael works in financial technologies, and he also runs CypherCon. Welcome, Michael. Thanks for joining us.
Hey, thanks, Ben. Glad to be here.
Great. Really happy to have you. Was really excited to get to know you on our little intro a couple weeks ago. Tell me a little bit about CypherCon and some of the stuff you guys do there.
Yeah, so CypherCon is a hacker conference in the state of Wisconsin. We're on our sixth year. Over 1,000 attendees, and for Wisconsin, that makes us the largest technology conference in the state.
Wow.
A lot of our friends in Minnesota have asked us to come over there and start a new event. So I'm announcing CecretCon. So CecretCon is a hacker meets privacy. Like, we all have secrets. Like, how do we maintain those secrets, right? So Wisconsin and Minnesota hacker conferences has been my thing lately.
That's really neat. And tell me a little about, one of the things you talked about early was sort of the reputation of hackers and conferences and futurism to have this kind of cyberpunkish dystopian view of it. Would you like to elaborate on that a little bit? I think the audience will find that interesting.
Yeah, so when you think hackers, right? Like, so I got little skulls on my shirt right now, right?
Oh, perfect.
You think cyberpunk, right?
Yeah.
And I was like why did hackers associate with cyberpunk? And it's the mix of like this dystopian future. And I came to the conclusion that like cyberpunk is dead. Like it's really cool, but it's outdated. Like, even the dark ages had culture in it, and that had to die too. So like cyberpunk came from a movement in the 80s that was like, everybody was scared of the Cold War, and like everybody thought that there was going to be this gritty, dangerous times, right? And like, I think being a new emerging area of cybersecurity and cyber war and hackers being counterculture to that, we grasped onto this like cool symbols of skulls
Yeah.
and the underground, right? And like, it's starting to get, like, to me, like, it's still cool, but I'm growing out of that. And I'm like, do we really want to like fight the system, or do we want to build and create a better world that we actually want to live in, right?
Yeah. It's funny when you brought it up, I thought about the numerous pieces of media like the video game Cyberpunk or maybe Blade Runner. And it's, I do find this stuff fascinating to think about futurism and what people think the future is going to be like. And there's sort of an overwhelming amount of dystopian stuff. And while it is fascinating, it can be, I think, maybe a little fatiguing to the mind to have to deal with just thinking about the future in such negative terms.
Yeah, like, so that's what I'm trying to overcome, right?
Mhm.
We should fight evil governments, but we should also guide them and vote and try to guide it the right direction. And I feel like our community, at least in the last 5 years, has starting to realize that. Like, once Vote Hacking Village came out, it's like, okay, let's stop the corruption. Oh, okay, now we're pretty good at lowering the corruption. Now, how do we guide things on the direction we're looking for, right? And then corporations, and like, I say this like tongue in cheek and dangerous, because the attendees watching this are in the corporate environments, but we also need to stop like sucking on the teats of evil corporations, hoping that we survive by dealing with the evilness, right?
Yeah.
And we should turn that conversation around of decentralizing, having competition, and creating our own ways of making stuff. Like, we're makers just as much as breakers, right?
Yeah. To me, it would always seem like the dystopian nature of it should, rather than be this fantasy, it should be sort of a clarion call for us to figure out how do we avoid this stuff? How do we make things a little bit better? The whole idea of technology was to make a better life for people, not this miserable future where everything is dank and decrepit and sad.
Exactly. Like, so the direction I'm taking things is an artistic movement, and it's called SolarPunk, right? And you're like, well, wait, like, why is SolarPunk that sounds like, solar panels and energy, but it's not just that. It's a movement, right? It's just a
Hmm.
name. SolarPunk is, the same things that our elders from the cyberpunk were
Hmm.
pushing, the values of counterculture,
Hmm.
of ingenuity and freedoms and independence and fighting for justice, right? But like, we're adding on a more futuristic look of that, of how do we create balances of technology with the life we want to live? Like, do we want to be in concrete bunkers, or do we want to be in lush gardens, right?
Yeah. You could see that oftentimes with urbanists too, people who talk about, a future beyond climate change and things where you have these very futuristic cities with green spaces and things like that. And I know it's definitely a world I would rather see than the one that people are forecasting for us. Do you know anything about that term solarpunk? Was that something you created, or is that something that's
No.
sort of popularized?
So SolarPunk, I'm guessing it's been around since the 90s. I'm not well researched on the origins of it. It started off as like a literatory, like artistic, art, like the art scene, and authors creating these fantasy worlds, right?
Hmm.
And I look at it and I'm like, that's the future I want. Like, a prime example of that is Epcot at Disney World,
Oh
right?
yeah.
So here's a mix of like potentially evil corporation, like the mouse crushes everybody, but yet they're looking at this future of glass domes and gardens, and we grow our own food, and they have like behind the scene tours where you can go look at, here's what the future should look like, right? An example of it.
Hmm.
And I'm like, why? Well, like, that's the life I want to live, not in a bunker, not like post-apocalyptic. Like, I still want to use computers, but I want to um, use them, use sensors and use operational technologies to like make things more beautiful. Let's elevate society, right?
Let's pivot to that a little bit. So, we do a lot of work, I know, in IoT, and obviously that's an intersection between security and technology
Exactly.
and futurism. I mean, how do you think that IoT and smart cities can sort of contribute to like a solar punk reality where we're actually benefiting from these things and looking at technology with maybe less of a skeptical when are the robots going to take us over view and more of a how can the robots make our lives better view?
Yeah. So my background, I was at Cushman and Wakefield up until the pandemic hit, and then everybody was getting rid of commercial real estate. And Cushman and Wakefield, if you're not familiar, has management of skyscrapers,
Hmm.
and smart cities come into play. And what is smart city? That just means a lot of IoT devices, right?
Yeah.
Smart city, you can start embracing automation. You can turn blinds so sunlight comes in. You can close blinds to keep cold out, right? On the very simple principles. You can have capacity in rooms. You can have automation of energy efficiencies, right? You can have skyscrapers talk to other skyscrapers and see if you can turn on um, maybe a centralized or decentralized systems of, like, say, air conditioning, for example, right?
Right.
And once you started embracing, sunlight coming into a building, now you can have like plant life inside the building. You can do humidity control. You can have sensors in each plant and say, hey, these need to be watered, right?
Hmm.
um, Overall efficiencies increase across the board using computers and aligning with lifestyle, right?
Definitely.
Same thing can be done at your home, right? For cheap, like very simple stuff. Get little smart sensors you plug into your outlets, and now you know what your devices are chewing down on power, right? And data and knowledge are power. Once you have that data flowing in, you can figure out how do you automate some of this stuff.
Oh,
So I'm
yeah.
excited.
I want to ask you for some advice. So I'm really fascinated by your mission, and if you can't already tell, by creating a more optimistic view of the future. I just think that that's a really good thing, and we talk. I guess maybe as humans we're drawn to negativity. Uh,
it's
First of all,
exciting, right? Like
yeah.
it's like eat popcorn while you're watching the world fall apart. You're just
Yeah.
hoping it doesn't get as close to you as like it could someday, right?
Yeah, maybe it's a combination of Schadenfreude and a number of other things. I was going to ask you, so you're trying to do this with CypherCon. What advice would you give other cons, people who organize cons that are either touching security or technology or something, to sort of create a more optimistic future? What are the types of things that either activities or messaging or maybe icons or whatever that you think you can do to sort of create that image?
Yeah, no, I like that question, and it's a difficult question, right? Because it's
That's
a
why I asked it.
yeah, like that's why I'm here. So I haven't heard a lot of this being spoken about, right? Of a more optimistic direction or a more cyberpunk future. It's really difficult. Like I look at like our entertainment, and there's a movie called There Will Be Blood, right? And there's like these smokestacks with fire shooting out, and they're big manly men,
Yeah,
coal marks on the face or oil marks, and we're like, yeah, macho,
great
right?
movie, extremely dark.
Yeah, it's dark, and it's
Yeah,
like that's what cyberpunk is. It's dark, and I'm like, okay, what do I foresee the future being? It's like, okay, electric vehicles, like there's particular names that come to mind that are electric vehicles, and like, no, let's not like just box that into one mentality. It's
yeah,
like it's a lot bigger than that. It's the future. And then um then I looked at my lawnmower, and I'm like, all right, like that's gas too. I'm like, cool, there's some really efficient and the use cases of a lawnmower needs to be strong. Let's get electric lawnmower, right? Like it just like slowly adds on itself. Now your question was, how does this apply to conferences? That's harder, right? Because like you
hmm,
still want to have that like cool factor. It's a social area. And let's be honest, like being a hippie hacker, like people aren't ready for that,
yeah.
but they're
I,
really close. Like maybe in 5 years, people are like, you know what? Like solar panels are cool, right?
yeah,
It's not
it's.
like, go
I'm sorry to
ahead.
interrupt you, but I was just going to say it's possible that maybe just being aware of the image that they're creating with these cons, with dark stuff. One thing that Ted mentioned to me, and I don't really think I noticed it until it was pointed out, was that there's an overwhelming view and security of the hacker with the black hoodie that they wear over their head, and their face is hidden. You can't see anything in their face. You just see this visage of someone. And then we go out and we want to say that we're going to be an ethical hacker, that we're going to help people with security, except we have this extremely dark image. So we try to avoid that stuff. It's not. It doesn't make you seem like an ally when you're when you're draped in secrecy and cloak and dagger and such. Um,
So I get it. It's a like I'm wearing a shirt with skulls on it, almost as kind of a joke, right? And that's what it's become. It's
yeah,
become this role playing of, hey, we're the dark underground, and that's that independence, and that's that we're fighting for freedoms and F society, and right. But we can still do all that, but put on positive outlooks, like freedoms, right?
yeah,
Real freedom to me is like my electrical system disconnected from the grid,
mm.
fu utilities, right? Like you're not going to increase my rates.
Yeah. But you're solving a problem. I mean, and fundamentally speaking, you're creating something.
Exactly.
You're moving forward. You're moving in a positive direction.
And when you really think of technology and you go back to the cores, it's energy, right? Like solar panels are generating me talking to you on this device that's connected to a grid of everybody else, right?
That's awesome.
It's exciting. It's like a vibrant future that I think we should embrace. So as a conference organizer, I'm trying to blend bio, tech, and nature together. So I'm hoping CypherCon becomes the first like renewable resources hacking village, right? Like it's IoT devices, but let's focus a little bit more on agricultural. Let's focus more on energy, and like what are better ways to look at those cores,
Yeah,
right?
absolutely.
We have, so I was one of the handful of organizers for DEF CON's first biohacking village. So it's like been an evolution of going from like biohacking to hacking my surroundings, right?
Hmm.
And I think we can put our dystopian, apocalyptic nightmares behind us, and like set aside these gore fantasies and start looking at like how do we actually elevate to a life we really want.
Yeah, it does seem like sometimes people miss the message of these dystopian fantasies.
Yeah,
Instead of a cautionary tale, they see it as a cool one.
yeah, like we're supposed to be fighting against that, not embracing it, right? Like,
So,
and the dark colors like the purples and the blacks for sure, right, and the dark blues, it's really hard to change your mentality and maintain that masculinity when you're having these like light blues, sky blues, and greens, right?
mhm.
So it's one of these movements that I don't expect to catch on like in the short term, but I feel much more comfortable sleeping at night to kind of like push a positive message, a building while also fighting for our freedoms.
This might be a sort of a evolution of, hacking and technology and computer nerds and such. It very much, growing up for me, 80s, 90s, very much a counterculture thing is that if you were into these things, you were not necessarily in the mainstream. You were outside of it. It had its own little independence and uniqueness to it. In fact, it would even be the type of thing where if somebody was really good with a computer, it might be, hey, be nice to that guy because, they know what they're doing with their computer. They're going to hack you or something like that. That's the image. And I was wondering if maybe you think that as sort of coding and cybersecurity and technology awareness and our usage of it and IoT and all this stuff grows and becomes more mainstream, is this sort of the growing pains of technology that in order for it to become more mainstream and accepted by all, we need to embrace a little bit more of a holistic, positive vision that maybe SolarPunk has?
Yeah, I think you're dead on. It's a maturity thing.
Mm.
It's like we grew up in a society that computers weren't considered cool. It was the jocks that were playing, there's movies like Revenge of the Nerds and and now data and knowledge are like highly sought after. Like the people making six figures are in our industry, right? Like
Yeah,
here we are. We had the foresight that this was the future. And maybe deep down inside we're still frightened, and that is evident in this imposter syndrome, right?
yeah,
Like
definitely.
how do we come off as like masculine enough to like to walk in front of the boardroom and say like, hey, here's what's happening, here's our strategic direction, here's how we tactically approach things. Like we have to come off as like strong, right,
Hmm.
and knowledgeable.
Confident.
And like when you show up in a when you show up in like light colors and stuff like that, everybody's like hippies, like that's, is that weak? Like art, like we don't value art in society. Well, we should like
Absolutely.
like, and it's almost hilarious. It goes full circle. Like the vibe in in cyberpunk came from artistic movies and direction. So like, why do we lowbrow at art and new directions and futuristic, ideas?
Yeah, I mean, it's
So
becoming a little trite to go with some of these themes at this point. It's not as cool as it once was. You're a poser now.
yeah, so and I think you were dead on in that. Like, why am I doing this? It's like I'm starting to realize that the counterculture to what was the counterculture is now my counterculture. So like I'm
Mhm.
embracing art and sciences and biological, mixes of mechanical to um like a universe that I really want to see, right? Like
Oh,
it's it's exciting.
yeah,
I
definitely. I
don't
mean,
I don't see everybody catching on immediately, right?
Yeah. Well, one of the great things about working in this industry, and I'm sure you'll agree, is that this is an industry of change, and there's always something new going on. And the fact that we don't know what's happening to me is intriguing in and of itself. I have another question for you. So I asked you the tough question. I'll give you sort of an easier one to end it.
Right.
Come up with one piece of advice. So I talked to you, I said, what would you advise someone who's organizing a con surrounding this? But let's
Yeah.
be a little bit more broad in general. What's something that the average person can do to try and move towards like a solar punk future, or try to improve this image? Just an everyday person, maybe all they use their computer for, they have their iPhone, they like to check their email, maybe they play a game or something like that. Just an average person, maybe not exactly like you and I.
Yeah, so really great question. Like I'm going to give you like a cop out answer and then a real answer. So
Okay,
the cop
great.
out answer is just research SolarPunk and research like optimistic ways you can use technology to improve lives, right?
Mhm.
Like and look around your organization you work at. Like if you're in healthcare, how can you use tech to improve healthcare, right? So apply the philosophy of SolarPunk and wake up every day saying like I'm going to move the future forward, not like stay in my bunker and like fight the system.
Don't be stagnant. Don't accept things as they are.
Yeah, and so that's my cop out answer. So do your research, understand how to move things forward. A real answer is take care of yourself and your family, right? Like literally the easiest thing you can do is just go to the doctor and get a checkup. Like put in new air filters in your house. Like do you know how much your house uses on an average day worth of power, right? Simple stuff. Put a plant in your house, right? Like start imagining what that life is that would be
Mhm.
perfect and then make it happen, like
Yeah.
will it into existence, right?
Yeah. A lot of people want to wait for things to change around them, but you sort of have to be the person that initiates the change for those things to happen.
Exactly.
Yeah. Well, thanks for joining me. I really appreciate this conversation. I could go on all day about this. Why don't you give me one thing to leave with the audience? What's one thing that people can take away from this before we wrap up?
So so all good movements and all good new philosophies take a community, right? So get involved in your community, whatever that community is, and don't take like there's a lot of people in our community that show up to these events and try me, right?
Mhm.
So it's okay the first time when you show up and it's like a little bit about you because you're there to like learn your knowledge.
Mhm.
But it should eventually start ticking over to volunteering. And it should be ticking over to presenting. And it should be doing podcasts, right? It should be elevating society and giving back to our community that's given to you is key to elevating everybody. So that's my message at the end is go out and do something and elevate people around you.
Awesome. That's a great message. I really appreciate it. Michael, thank you so much for joining us. How can people reach you?
So you can Google my name and
All
I'm
right, great.
everywhere, right?
We'll put some other contact information for you on the website too. So thanks everybody for joining us today. Really appreciate it. If you appreciate this conversation, want to hear more from Michael, you can go to tedharrington.com/podcast. Again, thank you so much, Michael. We'll talk
Thanks, man.
more. All right, see you later.